Hi, I'm John DeDakis, and you're one to one with me. And I'm one to one with Tyrone Bragg. Ty and I go back probably almost 50 years. And I was in the Army doing interviews for a special events radio unit. In fact, yesterday I interviewed my boss, Herb Glover, and Ty was played the part of Judas in Jesus Christ Superstar, the traveling production in Europe. And I was stationed in Frankfurt. And one of our mutual friends, Mike Little, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Ty, we did the interview in Mike's house or his apartment or something, and it was an interview where I got a chance to talk to Ty about being in Superstar. Race relations was a big deal back in the military back then, so we talked about that. And then Ty and I, 10 years later, worked together as reporters at the Christian Broadcasting Network in Virginia Beach. Obviously, we've gone our separate ways. I'm in the Baltimore area now, and Ty, you're in Atlanta, am I right?
Just outside of Atlanta in
Just outside of
Douglasville.
Atlanta. Douglasville. All right, that's to the west, if I'm not
Right,
mistaken. All
right,
right.
right.
So anyway, Ty Bragg, welcome to this one-to-one show. And what's up? What's been happening?
Well, I'm a little bit older now. I'm not doing broadcast anymore. I'm singing. Music has always been my avocation, so I'm involved in that. I'm deeply involved in the Anglican Church now, which is the Anglican Diocese of the South, and with the province work. I'm a member of the Standing Committee for the Anglican Diocese of the South, and I'm having a good time in my
Well,
old
let's.
age.
Well, you're younger than I am, but everybody's younger than I am these days. Let's go back to, I think it was 71, 72. I was at AFN in the 72, 73. So that was about the time we met. And as I remember, we talked extensively about the issue of race relations. And as I remember, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I remember that you were very, I think, I think it's probably safe to say that you were agonizing about being in that kind of an important production, Superstar, and yet you were a black man playing the role of the betrayer of Jesus Christ, and that was a really difficult time for you. Am I right in remembering that? And can you go into a little more detail on how you felt then and how things have changed since, if they have?
Well, yes, I had a very interesting relationship with the church at that time. I was a sort of semi-bitter young man. Uh, the discrimination, the racism that existed in America prevented me from fully making a commitment to Christianity. I didn't like the fact that the man who was chosen to carry the cross for Jesus when he was crucified was allegedly a black man.
Hmm.
That was offensive to my sensibilities. I thought that it was interesting that the one who betrayed Jesus in the scripture was characterized as a black man on stage.
Hmm.
So at the end of the production, I would raise the peace sign, and with the other hand, I'd put the Black Power sign up at
Uh-huh.
the end of the production. It was interesting, and it sort of was a serendipitous kind of experience because of what came out of it. But yes, I was going through turmoil inwardly, and to get away from the United States was probably the best thing that could have happened to me at that time.
Was music something that you always wanted to pursue? Were you, in a sense, living your dream at that point?
Yeah, I was studying music for music performance at the University of Evansville in Evansville, Indiana, that summer, and I couldn't find a job. It was jobs were very difficult to come by, especially for young black people. And I did get a job driving a taxi cab,
Hmm.
part-time taxi cab driver. And it happened that I picked up a couple at the downtown Evansville and took them to the mall area, or I picked them up at the mall actually. And in Evansville, by the way, the first mall ever built in the United States was there in Evansville, Indiana. Anyway, I picked up this couple, took them to their hotel, and on the way, we were in a discussion. They discovered that I was studying music. Then they wanted to know what instrument. I told them voice, and they said, what voice? And I said, I'm a tenor. And they said, well, are you any good? And I said, hell yeah. and and, and the
Of course.
upshot, now trust this, they offered me 2 tickets to a performance of Superstar that night that was being held at the Coliseum. I didn't even know they were in town. So I went, and they asked me if I would audition afterward. It seems that 2 of the people who had attempted the role of Judas had blown their voices out over a short period of time while singing that role. Well, I was in probably one of the best vocal conditions I've ever been in my life. I was studying the opera Don Giovanni, and had been singing and was in very good voice. When they auditioned me, they immediately offered me the role of Judas, and I actually turned them down because I had a small scholarship to university, and but they pursued me for a couple of weeks every day on the phone, and I can't tell you what clicked, but I decided to go with them, thinking I could come back with a pocket full of money and have a better time in school.
When you were in Europe, you said that it was probably just the right time for you to be overseas. So, what then was that like for you to be with the traveling production of Superstar, living in Europe, and going through this turmoil that you described? What did you learn from that about life from that experience?
Well, the performance was the performance. That was when you were on stage, getting in character, and doing what you needed to do. But afterward, I ended up living in Europe for another 5 years. The upshot of the whole thing was, John, as we discussed there in Germany, I went through a tremendous transformation in my life because that's when I became a Christian.
Mhm.
I submitted myself, yielded myself to the truth about Jesus Christ being my Savior, and I was subsequently discipled there in The Hague in the Netherlands, and with the relationships that were developed with not only the indigenous folk there, but with a lot of Americans who were based in The Hague. It gave me a completely different perspective than I had experienced here in America. And
What was the catalyst? I mean, what was it that clicked that made you make that commitment?
to Christianity,
Right.
well, I think if you ever participate or been involved in stage production, you want to develop the character. And looking at Judas, I decided to read the Gospel of John and some other portions of the Scripture, and compare the Judas in the Bible to the Judas that I was portraying. And it opened some other doors and a lot of questions that I had about Christianity. I had been um, involved with some groups. I'd been a paid soloist in a Lutheran church in America. I had worked with or been involved with Christian groups, InterVarsity Christian Fellowship, Young Life, just sort of there. And then oh, I would get involved and then get away from it because it just didn't. My life didn't conform with what was happening in those groups. Um, the, the divisions that existed between white and black people and in the churches just wasn't compatible with my life and the way I could then the way I was living. I
What do you
mean,
mean?
I had Well, I guess I had to learn to live in two different worlds. There was the African American or Black community I was born and grew up in. Of course, my family is sort of integrated anyway, but still, I was a Black man, and to be associated with the arts and primarily white people, and to learn to live in the white community. So that's the dilemma that a lot of Black people have. You learn to operate and function two different worlds. Um, and when I embraced Christianity, I actually began to embrace a third world, as it were, that has influence on both the other two. And in order to really embrace that third world of Christianity, all of the stuffs that came out of those other two had to come in submission to that third one. So I learned to live a life that was independent of all of that. And that 5 years that I lived in Europe brought about a great transformation. And if you let me, there's a scripture that is very important to me in Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. It says, the first one says that we need to present ourselves to God as living sacrifices, which is our reasonable form of worship to Him. The second verse is we should not be conformed to the patterns of this world, but to be transformed by the renewing of our minds, which would bring us into conformity with the truths and the teachings of Jesus. So that's what took place. So everything that I had learned from living out my life in these other two worlds had to come into conformity with the one that was most important to me. And that's the way I conduct myself now.
Well, and that must have been a process and is probably still an ongoing process. What would you say is the distinguishing characteristic then of this third world that you've been living in since you made that commitment back in Europe?
Well, I posted in there, Jesus is the answer for the world today. We're supposed we're supposed to love our brothers. If you say you love your if you say you love God and hate your brother, then you're a liar. And that's the bottom line. We, if I think there are a lot of people that are involved in the church who are living that out, but the church has been responsible. It's failed in a lot of ways with the divisions. There's as much polarization in a lot of the churches as there is politically. And the bottom line is this: people want to look at the church and judge them or Christianity based on the attitudes and actions of some people. But what we should be judging the church by is God Himself. He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. If I align myself with Him properly, then I'm going to be living a life that will honor Him and honor what the truths that are established in Christianity. If I allow myself to sort of have one foot in the world and one foot playing church, then it's being a double-minded man, and that's what's happened. Same thing in South Africa and in America. The church was responsible for the establishment of apartheid in South Africa, right, because they wanted justification for the division of races. In America, the churches split at the Civil War over the whole issue of slavery, and the churches weren't reunited until the 1990s. That was the beginning of that with the Presbyterian Church, the first one, 150 years after the fact. That's an interesting thing to do some research on.
So you mentioned the challenge of navigating, two worlds, and also being in this third world. Let's go back to the dilemma, for lack of a better word, of being who you are and living in a society that is still, I guess, I don't know, maybe you would agree or disagree, still has a lot of vestiges of racism. So, how do you navigate that? And put another way, maybe just another twist on that. In addition to perhaps being on the receiving end of white racism, have you experienced racism from within the African American community as well?
Well, when you have your foot in both two different worlds, yes, you experience from both sides. To be called an Uncle Tom um, by African Americans because of the artistic things that I'm involved in, the way I conduct myself. I'm involved in an interracial marriage. Um, that is a difficult thing, and to hold views that some people would consider very conservative. I don't consider myself a conservative. I consider myself an independent because I don't like a lot of conservatives.
Mhm.
But I cannot align myself with the left either because of the principles that undergird their party. Yeah, you get it from both sides. And I tell them when I'm called an Uncle Tom, I wear that as a badge of honor because I read the book. And you know, he and I have a lot in common. So
Well, and so and what does that mean? What do you mean when you say that? That you and Uncle Tom
Uncle
have a
Tom
lot
was
in
a
common?
he was a loving man. He did not hold a grudge. He didn't um, he didn't react violently to what was happening to him because of the relationship that he had established with God Almighty. Uh, you know, I'm no saint by any means. I heard somebody say the other day, uh, I'm a I won't say that on here. I'll let
Well,
that
we're
go.
not
So
governed by the FCC, so go
I
for it.
know. Well, he said I'm a peace loving person, but I'm lethal.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, what does that mean for you?
Don't mess with my family.
Okay. Well, we won't.
Yeah. Yeah. No, so uh, uh, we have very good friends. They're people that I do not I wouldn't go out of my way to associate with, but I will associate with anyone who would want to associate with me. How's that?
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Um, so we're now in, an especially toxic time. Not only is
Yes.
there the pandemic, but there's also a resurgence of racial unrest in this country.
Hmm.
How have you felt about, dealt with, observed the whole situation around? I mean, I'm just thinking of three off the top of my head that are the most recent. Obviously, there's the George Floyd thing. There's the Ahmaud Arbery, the guy in Georgia, not too far, I guess, from where you live, who was gunned down while jogging, and then most recently, the other night at the Wendy's in Minneapolis, the Rayshard Brooks shooting. Um, those have, in a sense, galvanized the current state of unrest. I mean, there's been looting and violence, but there have also been incredibly massive peaceful protests, not just in the United States, but around the world. So I wonder if you can talk a little bit about, what it's been like seeing all that and making sense of it and living your life going forward. And go ahead.
The first reaction, as you might appreciate from a person like myself, is outrage and anger over watching someone plead for his life and then to have someone brutally uh, uh, take that life. Uh, to see people killed for what seems to be minor infractions, because of conflict. There's anger, and that comes from me. I got angry, but at the same time, I had to. I'm not going to have a knee-jerk reaction and go out and protest and burn someone's building down. I'm hoping that um, some things will take place in our society um, to correct some of the things that are wrong. Not all police are bad. I'm involved in mentoring inmates in prison. Um, I have relationship with police officers. I've spent time at Angola prison where there are a lot of young people, and my heart really goes out to a lot of these young guys who are spending their entire lives. Here they are in their mid 20s, and they have been given life sentences for breaking the law 3 times in a row, um, for crimes that a lot of people are still walking on the street today. Um, the statistics are just ugly, and it hurts my heart that so many African American men are in prison, that so many African American men are killing one another. That's wrong. I mean, it's a very complicated thing, John. If someone breaks the law, they should be punished for it. But at the same time, when you have, and there are officers out there, I think that are sort of like those people that when they were young, they got beat up in school or something, and now they have a scepter to wield, and they're
Mm.
going to take it out on whoever they want, or their prejudice is just manifesting itself.
Do you feel
But
that I'm sorry to interrupt. Do you feel
go ahead,
that
no.
the situation is, in a sense, systemic? That the racism that has almost been institutionalized, so that it's, taken such deep roots that it's going to be difficult to root it out and change?
Yes, it is definitely systemic. Some people want to argue that there is no systemic racism, but one of the clear ways of seeing systemic racism is the economic situation that African American people find themselves in. The statistics show that African American people's wealth, by and large, the average wealth of an African American person is 10% of the average white person. And that's because of what has taken place in the past in America with redlining and what they call in the Midwest donut holes, uh, where African American communities were relegated to lesser tax benefits, schools, employment. My father couldn't find a job in the community we grew up in southern Indiana because they just didn't hire black people. I couldn't find a job when I was in school there because no one would hire me. Um, and as a result, the banking institutions wouldn't allow black people to buy houses. The GI Bill didn't wasn't an equal opportunity offer for people of color. There are all kinds of things that need to be researched and understood by people who would say there is not systemic racism. All of the nepotism that's taken place. You just, the opportunities for black people did not exist. I was told if you want to compete with someone who is white, you can't be equal to them. You have to be better
Right.
in order to gain a position. Um, I have been very fortunate because I've been gifted with a voice uh, that is good.
Right.
That's what people say. Okay, and it has opened a lot of doors for me. Had I not had been able to use that to open doors, I wouldn't be any different from a lot of the guys that I grew up on the same street with when I was younger.
Are
So
Have you experienced the whole driving while black experience?
yes, I've been pulled over. I've been stopped. Uh,
What's that
uh,
like? I mean, what's it like to have that happen?
Well, you do get the talk from concerned relatives. I had cousins and my parents who grilled me on the way I should conduct myself. It is humiliating to be pulled over for no reason and ask questions, but I didn't do anything stupid to get myself hurt. Um, it's
But how could you tell that this was racially motivated?
I didn't do anything wrong.
Okay, okay.
I didn't even, I didn't. Am I arguing with you? Am I angry? Am I
Yeah.
showing my anger? Uh, I mean, if you don't have a tail light out, if you haven't made a wrong turn, you're just being pulled over. And that, honestly, for me, it's only happened a couple of times, but it did happen. Um, so,
Can you describe it?
well, the officers were pretty cordial about the whole thing after they looked at my stuffs, and then they let me go. But you know, of course, I didn't. They didn't try to put cuffs on me or something like that, and
So they weren't
because
goading
I hadn't
you,
done.
but yeah, I mean,
No,
it could have gone south, right?
it could have gone south. And I think I've been a very fortunate person in not having been caught up in things like that, like some people.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of talk now about defunding the police or reforming the police. Um, where do you come down in terms of, specific things that can be done to try to turn this all around in terms of policing and in terms of our society itself?
Well, not all not all police officers are bad. There are a lot of people, a lot of police officers that are good cops. There is a bad element out there. I'll give you that. I've seen them in the prison system. They don't regard anyone that some of those guys that don't regard anyone that's in prison as still being human, and they treat them that way. Um, and But there are good officers who still have a conscience and have a heart, and their whole it seems to me purpose is to serve and safeguard the community, and I applaud those people. So defunding the police force is not a very smart thing. Um, and we when we worked as journalists, we had these debates. My beat was the Supreme Court and social issues and that kind of thing. And there are elements in our society that want to undermine this democratic republic that has been established. There are people who are trying to destroy it from the inside out. It would only take, I think, two or three more states to convene a constitutional convention, and you know that that's something that's taking place. And if that were to happen, and all of those people who are totally opposed to what the United States stands for and what it has done in the past were to have that happen, then the Constitution is laid wide open on the table,
Hmm.
and everything is up for grabs. I mean, our laws, everything that has been established here would be uh, 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 gone. All of the covenants would be undone. There would not be any covenants, and what they come out with on the other side, who knows? There are people who would like to see that happen.
But I'm not, I mean, at least in the current climate, I'm not hearing a lot of talk about a constitutional convention. If anything, I'm hearing let's just try to live up to the Constitution we've got.
I don't hear that, John. That's where we disagree. I think that there are people who are opposed to living out, having constitution, the laws based on constitution, and the whole thing about precedents being set and living by those. Uh, it's just like those people in some of the religious institutions who say, the Bible was written by men 2,000 years ago. We don't like what's in there, so let's revise it with people who are contemporary to make it fit what we want it to be. Uh, Unfortunately, it's unfortunate that those people are out there, and that's their purpose, so that's my
So,
perspective on it anyway.
but are there things that you can think of that the police that need to be reformed about the police and the way police function?
Well, yeah, the laws need to be changed as well, and to for politicians to talk about police reform or prison reform is not a very good thing for them politically. You don't see many people going out and campaigning on those issues, but
Maybe
that
you will.
definitely need. Well,
Yeah.
hopefully that would take place. I think that our current president has done some things that nobody else has done with allowing some of these people who have been sent to prison for life, multi-life sentences, to get out of prison. The statistics about, especially African American men who are in prison now, the numbers are just staggering. And for the kind of crimes that they have been imprisoned for, is just unconscionable. Uh, and the only way to turn that around is to have some prison reform. And with respect to police, I think that was your question.
Mhm.
I remember when I was came to Atlanta to cover the pro-life demonstrations here when they were first going. There was um, they did a massive set-in across Atlanta, and they beat those totally peaceful protesters unmercifully.
Mm.
I had video of that, and it was very difficult to watch. They they um, uh, they put a lot of pain on these people and hurt them. I saw one man's arm broken in two
Mm.
because of that. Wasn't here in Atlanta; it was in another place. And I recall that I was on a plane someplace, and there was a Korean man seated next to me. We got into a discussion, and he told me that he was employed by the Atlanta Police Department to teach them because he was a martial arts expert, pressure points and holds, and the ways to inflict pain without showing it, and they they actually were doing that kind of thing, and you see it happening across the country now. So
Given given
go
your
ahead.
perspective, going way back to the civil rights movement to where we are now, and seeing all that turmoil that's happened and advances as well, um, are you hopeful for the future? Are we going to really be able to turn this around, or are things going to get worse? What's your, how do you see it?
Jesus is the answer, John. So you know, I,
Why
my
am I
my
not
glass,
surprised? Yeah.
yeah, my glass is always full. I fully anticipate that something will take place where we will have a revival again here in America, where the church will stand up on its hind legs, as it were, and be the church. Um, I'm optimistic. If you look at the polarization that's taken place politically, and even in the Christian church now, um, there are divisions there that don't seem like they can be bridged. So something has to happen. I believe supernaturally for this thing to be turned around. Laws haven't done it. The 13th Amendment didn't do it. Civil rights laws haven't done it. Um, um, it's a heart issue. You know what I'm
Mm.
saying?
I do. It really, all of those other things that you're talking about, might make some changes, but, I think you and I do agree that unless the human heart changes, the way, you treat people, the way you approach life, that it can't, those kinds of things can't be imposed. It has to come
Right.
from inside the person to really, really make a fundamental change.
And the different. May I tell one story?
Go ahead.
Some time ago, when I lived in Virginia Beach, I was part of a church group there, and a man came to me one day, and he asked me. I won't say his name or anything, but he lived there in Virginia Beach at the time. We were on the same board of directors, so to speak, for the church. And he called me and said, "Ty, can we go to breakfast and just meet?" And I said, "Sure." And we sat there for a few minutes, and he said, I need to tell you that I am a prejudiced man. I have never liked black people, and I hold these views, and I don't, it's just that. But he said, I have had to quit my job because I was asked to do some things that were not above board, and I couldn't do that. He wouldn't do certain things that weren't above board, but he still held on to his racist position. And he said the problem is I had to go with another company and start over, and the people that have been placed under me are all African American men. And he said, I don't know what to do with them. I said,
God's got a sense of humor.
yeah, this is a true story. And I said, well, African American people, by and large, can tell when you don't like them. So, especially when white people don't like them, we have sort of a sixth sense. You can trust me on that or not; doesn't matter. Anyway, I said, if you genuinely treat, he says, well, you're different. I said, no, I'm not. I'm a human being. You look at me in a certain way, and there is a relationship that can be established. You have to do that with other people. You need to let go of all of the crap that has caused you to hold on to these attitudes. And we talked about this at length. I can't go into all of that, but he had to move away from that area to start this new job. And sometime later, it was a number of months. I don't know, it was less than a year. He came back and he called and said, "Can we go to lunch?" And we did. And he told me that the relationship with those men was just stellar, because he had taken to heart the things that we had discussed. They were actually salesmen, okay? And in this particular city that they're living in, they had relegated them to a certain community or district for reaching out. And I almost said his name. He said, I told them that to ignore that, to go wherever. And they became the number one sales group in that business. And he had a very good relationship with them. Those things can be bridged for people who want to bridge them. You don't have to be outwardly racist in order to propagate racism. You just go along with the status quo that's happening in our society, and you hold on to attitudes that have been imposed on you by society, I suppose.
What I want to do is we started by talking about your music. I want to, in the few minutes we've got left, I want to go to your Facebook page and share something that you just performed. I think it was May, at the end of May. And I mean, you're a lot older now than you were when you were in your, what was it, 20s doing Superstar.
Yeah, I was
and
23 years old.
Yeah, well, you still got your chops, and so I want to. This may be a little raggedy as I pull this up, but I want people to hear you and see you as we share this. Let me see if I can share this screen. Why am I not able to do that? Let me. It's going to take a minute. This is live TV, live internet. No producer. I'm my own producer. And
well, John, you're supposed to have a bunch of employees doing that for you, a big mixing board.
Yeah, right. Good luck with that. Okay. All right. I figured out what I'm doing. All right.
Okay.
Here we go. I'll roll the tape. We'll listen to it, and then we'll talk on the other side of it. So here it is. Let me get it going. You can see and hear, correct?
He's beginning to play now, just as soon as his tails are fixed. There
Okay.
we go.
All right.
Go out and tell our story, let it echo far and wide. Make them hear you, make them hear you. How justice was our battle, and how justice was denied. Make them hear you, make them hear you. And say to those who blame us for the way we chose to fight, that sometimes there are battles that are more than black or white. And I could not put down my sword when justice was my right. Make them hear, make them hear. Go out and tell our story to your daughters and your sons. Make them hear, make them hear, and tell them in our struggle we were not the only ones. Make them hear, make them hear. Your sword may be a sermon or the power of the pen. Teach every child to raise his voice and then my brothers stand. Will justice be commanded by 10 million righteous men? Make them hear you when they hear you. I'll be with you.
Wow. Whoa. It's very powerful.
Yeah, good
And
song.
music is, whoops, hold it. I've got to, whatever's going on there has got to stop. Something else came up, at least in my earphones.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, what is there something? Is there? Can you put that in context for us? What was the event?
That was a multicultural choir that I was singing with at the time. We did a whole variety of music, from high music to down to earth gospel. It was, and we were able to perform uh, uh, a lot of music, different genres. And I fortunately was called on to do that solo. I really enjoyed doing that.
It was very powerful. Now, before the coronavirus hit, you were performing a lot. Am I right?
Yes, in my sort of, I guess I consider myself retired. Music has always been an avocation from the time I was in Superstar. When I went back to school, I ended up in journalism and we worked together. But I've always sung in choirs. And these days, the baby boomers are coming of age. You're one of them. I'm one of them. Um, and they're continuing to come. I'm right on the crest of the wave there. Um, and over the next few years, there are going to be many, 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 many more. And they're building retirement facilities for these people. And there are also a lot of those people from the golden generation that are in these places. So I have put together a whole group of music that is composed of standards and spiritual music, stuffs that these people really love, and I I do a whole variety of music, and they've been invited to come into these places and perform for them for, an hour at a time.
Do you
So
travel? Do you travel around the country as well?
if people are willing to pay for my travel and
Oh,
feed
that.
me, have have food, I will go. Okay, how's that?
Okay, that's fine.
And,
That's good.
and it doesn't hurt if they line my pockets with a little something too. So.
This has been a treat. I'm really glad that we've had a chance to talk. Is there anything else you want to talk about before we wrap it up? Maybe we can do this again sometime.
Well, I would love to. I'm unashamedly a believer. That's my thing. It's where I am. I work with the Archbishop with the Anglican Diocese of the South. I'm on a standing committee. I'm a music minister at my church. It's a multicultural church, a multiracial church rather, not multicultural. Well, I guess it would be multicultural too because we have people from various countries that attend the church. Um, and that's my heart. That's my primary goal, is to propagate the gospel and live it out. So I can be angry on the inside, but I cannot allow that anger that I see because of injustice to be manifest by going into the streets and doing something that's going to bring harm to someone else. I
Right.
think there's a different answer, John.
Right.
So that's why I conduct myself the way I do.
Well, and I've really appreciated that the story about being able to communicate on a deep level authentically with other people, to be able to get beneath a lot of the surface differences that we've got, to try to find common ground. It really seems like that's so important.
Well,
Um,
it is difficult to have discussion about these issues without raising passion. People have to be able to sit down and not talk past one another. You that's one of your phrases. Uh,
yeah.
to one, I love the mantra. You should listen to learn rather than to respond. When
Yes.
you are having a relationship with someone, and that's the beginning of communication.
It really is. Well, we could go on, and I hope we'll have another chance to do this. We've been speaking with Tyrone Bragg, one of my longtime friends from back in the day, and we've stayed in touch. We were colleagues at CBN News, and we share an interest in music. He shares an ability in music, and as you can tell, he's a thoughtful, deep, interesting person, not to mention talented. So, Ty, thanks very much for doing this. Uh, and this has been fun. Thanks.
Thank you, my friend.
To be continued.
Okay.
Bye.